There is a brand new product in the Distress line, and I could not wait to tell you all about them. The new product is these Distress watercolor pencils from Tim Holtz. And in this video, I'm going to share a few techniques and several tips along the way. So let's get into it. I'm going to share several things that I like about the pencils and my favorite techniques using them, but I'm not going to go into too much detail as there are so many videos already here on YouTube. But I hope you stick with me so that you can make your own decision if you're going to get them or not. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to make sure that they blend out really nice. So I am giving medium pressure here on some Distress watercolor paper. I'm not pressing too hard, but I do want to make sure that I'm getting enough color here. I have this watercolor brush. I'm just going to squeeze it just a little bit to get that water on the tip here. I'm going to go in and you could see just how creamy it is. These do not have wax in them like normal watercolor pencils, so that you are going to get a lot of that flecking of the color. So the lighter the pressure you put on your paper, the less flecks you'll get. I don't mind the flecks. I think it might add to whatever I'm doing, but as you could see, this just blends out beautifully. Go back and get more of that color. Isn't that amazing? So beautiful. And this color is Seedless Preserves, one of my go-to colors in the Distress line. My favorite way to use watercolor pencils is to actually take the color from the pencil itself with the watercolor brush. You could see it's just picking all of that up, and this is going to be on dry paper. So I'm just going to blend this out. You could see how well that does. So pretty. I'm gonna rinse off my brush here, and I'm going to add a little bit of water here, and you're going to see that it will blend out just like watercolors. I don't know where exactly I put that. There we go. Isn't that pretty? And you could build up your color as much as you need. I find that adding a light layer of color first and then building up on top is going to give the best results if you are doing a watercolor painting or something. I am not a fine artist. I'm just going to be using these mainly for card making. It's easier to put more color on versus take color off. If you want, while the color is still wet, you can add some water droplets to get a little bit more wicking going on, and that's what I love about the Distress line. I didn't see much movement in the more dry color, but you can see just a little bit here and there. Those places were probably still a little bit wet. I didn't find, like down here, you're not going to get too much movement. Another way to use them is to dip them in a little bit of water, and then you can color just like that. Right on. This is dry, okay, and then you can go in and blend that out a little bit. You get definitely a lot more saturation of color that way. This depends on what your preference is. And I'm going to wet this, and then this is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to do this wet on wet. Not as much saturation in color. So adding the pencil to a wet surface, you're going to get some of these harsh lines depending on what color you're using. I notice that blues and purples really don't like to blend on wet surfaces. So just keep that in mind when you are using them. One thing that I love about these watercolor pencils is that you can blend the colors together so easily. So here I have some picked raspberry. And then I'm going to take some of this prize ribbon, and I'm putting quite a bit of the color onto the cardstock here. This is Distress watercolor paper, and I'm overlapping in the center. Add just a little bit more on the side here. I'm going to take my watercolor brush, make sure that there's water on the tip there, and starting from one end, I'm just going to blend this together in the center, and then just blend it out. And then once all the color is saturated with water, you can go back in and mix those two colors together to get a third color. can wipe off your brush if need be. Like I need to get a little bit of this water. It keeps pulling out of my brush. But then you get a nice pretty purple. For this next technique, I'm just going to spritz my stamp a little bit. This is one of the new Tim Holtz stamps, and I'm actually going to take some fall colors, dip them in a little bit of water to get it wet, and then I'm just going to color directly onto my stamp here. And I used a little bit of, what color was that? That was fossilized amber. This one is peeled paint because I know I'm going to get a lot of questions. Not really paying too much attention where it goes, just as long as it gets on there. This one is rusty hinge. This one is fired brick. So I just splatted the stamp on there to kind of get that color off and all of that water, and let's see what we get. It kind of got a little bit muddy, probably my fault, but I'm gonna go back in now, not re-wetting these pencils at all. Just going to go in and color this stamp. Spritz with water, and let's see. Just gonna splat it down and press down. Leave it there for a second just to help that color get off. And that's a little bit better. You could see a little bit more definition on that leaf. It's really nice. All right, I have a piece of white watercolor cardstock. This is DIstress watercolor cardstock. Just going to take those pencils again, just kind of just color randomly. Because there's a little bit of water on here, it kind of blends out a little bit. May need a little bit more. Tap off some of the excess water. And a little bit of purple on this one. And some of this fired brick. This is so fun to do because I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, and that's what I love about this technique. I spritz the watercolor paper, spritz the stamp a little bit, and let's just go right here. Oh, that is amazing. Okay, another little spritz. Let's go here. Beautiful. I probably can get one more stamp. Let's see. All right, so this next technique, I'm going to see if I can color on top of this DIstress background. This, I don't know what I was doing with it, but I found it in my bin where I keep all of my backgrounds. That way I can kind of just go to it. Okay, this is amazing. I'm gonna go in with a little bit of Villainous Potion. I wish this image wasn't stamped in black because I think you'd be able to see it a little bit better. Either way, this is really cool. Just another addition to our creativity process. I go in with some of this green. This is really, really cool. All right, you know I'm gonna go in with some splatters. Go up here. I love this technique, and I'm going to give it another try on a different background that I've created. I'll have to find one, but I'll stamp it a little bit lighter, and then that way the color kind of shows up a little bit better. But this is pretty amazing. The next technique I'm going to do is I'm going to watercolor this image. I stamped this flower on some distress watercolor paper, and I stamped it on the back because if you try to stamp on the front of watercolor paper, this paper is so textured you are not going to get a nice crisp image. I also used some Distress Archival ink to stamp my image. It's very important to make sure that you're using waterproof ink if you are doing any watercoloring. So I'm going to go in along the edge of my stamp here, lightly put some of that color down. And I really like the watercolor pencils because I like to take my time, and I used to watercolor with zig markers, and I would have to kind of work a little bit fast or else that color wouldn't blend out as well. So I'm very lightly adding the color to the image. You don't want to press too hard. I'm just going to get a first layer of color on. And I'm not being too particular about where it is, how much it is, just as long as I get most of that image, because we are going to build up the color. But this is so simple, I promise you can do it too. All right, you want to make sure that your brush is clean. I'm just going to go in and pick up some of that color and blend it out, and it's going to be very light at first. Again, we are going to build up that color. Let's just get that first layer down. And what I'm doing is I am taking my brush, putting it on the color, and I'm blending it towards the center of the flower. Probably hard to see the color on camera. I do like to go in circular motions a little bit just to kind of grab that color, and then I'll kind of blend it out with strokes, if that makes sense. And you can always pounce as well, just a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wet brush, grab some of this peacock feathers, and grab that color right off that pencil, and just go in where I would think some of the darkest areas would be. I am not a perfectionist in any way. I just try to figure out where it would be and do my best. It's not really about it being perfect. It's about enjoying the process. And if you are enjoying the process, that's all it's gonna matter. All right, I'm going to pull some of that color up on top of the petals now. And now I'm going to push back some of that color to blend it out a little bit. And again, I'm not too worried about it being perfect. I will go outside the lines. I don't really care. I do want this to be a little bit messy watercolor look, and that is going to make it look like I know what I'm doing a little bit more than if I were to be, a perfectionist and kind of really be perfect with my shading and everything, because I know this is totally wrong, and that's okay. I like to believe there really is no rules in creativity. Some people try to do like do's and don'ts. It's more preference. If it works for you, then do it and find what works for you if you are struggling with a technique, because I used to hate watercoloring. Then I kind of just played around with different ways to blend out the color, and then I kind of found my own way. All right, I'm going to use some of the fossilized amber for the center. I do want to add a little bit of splatters. I don't know what I'm going to do with this just yet, but for the sake of what I like, I'm going to add a little bit of splatters, and you could see that it's going to blend into that peacock feathers perfectly. Whoops. All right, now we're going to take the peacock feathers, get it pretty wet on the tip here, And then what I like to do is just flick it just like this to create splatters. Because no project of mine is complete without splatters. And just like that, you have a beautifully colored watercolor image. One thing I love about these watercolor pencils is depending on the surface you're working on, you're going to get two completely different looks. To me, on the white surface, it looks more like I'm working with DIstress ink. And here on the kraft cardstock, it looks like I'm working more with DIstress Oxide ink. It has more of a chalky finish. I love sharing new techniques with you and different ways to help you gain the confidence you need to try them for yourself. That's exactly what I did in this video right here, where I share my go-to spray technique that will have you creating so many backgrounds. I'll see you there.